Good morning, everyone. My name is Brooke Conley and I'm a PhD candidate at Opus, based out of the University of Melbourne's Department of Surgery. I would like to start my presentation by acknowledging and paying my respects to the traditional custodians of the land on which I am zooming in from today, which is the Wurundjeri people, part of the Kulin Nations. I recognise that sovereignty has never been ceded and this always was and always will be Aboriginal land. I would like to acknowledge and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and extend this respect to any other Aboriginal and/or Torres Strait Islander people who are with us today. My presentation is discussing a project titled Staying Moving, Staying Strong, which aims to develop culturally appropriate information and education resources for Aboriginal people with osteoarthritis, rheumatoid arthritis, lupus and/or gout, of which my PhD project is embedded in. I will now play a short audio clip of a middle-aged Aboriginal woman from Western Australia who was diagnosed with osteoarthritis. In this clip, she is talking about trying to continue to umpire at basketball, and you can hear her being interviewed by WA researcher Charmaine Green.
I've been doing some basketball, but by the end of the game, I'm that sore and chuck ice on it.
Yeah.
So I just ice it, and then I just rest it mainly.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
So what's the steps that you actually take to manage your condition?
Icing it. I don't even know, and then I put a heat pack on it. So it's a bit weird. It's just like 1 minute I ice it, then it's like no, and then I've got to put the heat pack on it, and just maybe laying up with a pillow underneath my leg, laying on the bed for a while and taking some Panadol.
But you also take the Panadol
and Nurofen.
Now, where did you learn to do that? What has your doctor told you? Has anyone told you how to manage?
No, I just did that myself. I think when watching my grandfather, he had this, and watching him, he used to take that. So I just took it.
Took what?
Panadol and Nurofen.
You can hear from her story that there was an absence of information explaining both what osteoarthritis was and what she could do to manage it. These strategies she was using, including ice, heat and rest, did not come from healthcare providers. It was through observing her grandfather. Her story highlights a gap that this project is aiming to address. This is one person's story, however, we know anecdotally that other members of community, both in Western Australia and Victoria, have reported a similar experience. Arthritis affects approximately 3.6 million Australians, with around 85,600 of those being Aboriginal and/or Torres Strait Islander people. For the purpose of this presentation, I will now refer to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people as Aboriginal people. In Australia, the prevalence of osteoarthritis in Aboriginal people is between 1.2 and 1.5 times higher than non-Aboriginal people. And the burden of disease is greater at 31 disability adjusted life years per 1,000 people for Aboriginal people versus 22 per 1,000 people for non-Aboriginal people. This pattern of higher prevalence and greater burden of disease is consistent across other arthritis conditions, including rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, and gout. Health education resources are proposed as one way to improve Aboriginal people's health outcomes. Patient education is one of the pillars of best practice for managing arthritis conditions. It aims to increase disease knowledge, promote involvement in the decision-making process, and encourages self-management. In order to achieve these benefits, patient education resources should be adapted to encompass social, emotional, and cultural well-being to become more appropriate and meaningful to Aboriginal Australians. As we know, barriers arise within healthcare when cultural factors are not acknowledged, respected, or prioritised. Despite an extensive range of arthritis information resources being available, currently no resources have been culturally adapted and developed in collaboration with Aboriginal people with arthritis conditions. What we know from research, as well as common sense, is when health education materials are co-designed and co-developed with Aboriginal people, resources are more likely to be accepted and utilised by Aboriginal patients, families, and communities. The aim of this project is to develop culturally appropriate information and education resources for Aboriginal people with osteoarthritis, rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, and/or gout. This project involves a collaboration of Western Australian and Victorian clinicians, researchers, and Aboriginal community members. The project is divided into 6 phases, aiming to address the current need for culturally adapted arthritis resources designed with and by Aboriginal community. The first 3 phases are being completed simultaneously by 2 research groups located in Western Australia and Victoria. Stage 2 involves qualitative interviews to explore Aboriginal community members' experience of engaging with health resources, their informational needs in relation to arthritis, and preferences regarding the format of health information. Research yarns will be conducted with 36 to 40 Aboriginal community members who have osteoarthritis, rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, and/or gout, and are living in either Western Australia or Victoria. From these interviews and through our community engagement efforts, we will address phase 1, which comprises of establishing 2 community reference groups, one in Western Australia and one in Victoria, and a single advisory group. The community reference group will comprise of approximately 6 to 8 individuals who experience the arthritis conditions previously mentioned. The group members will range in age and geographical location, including metropolitan, rural, regional, and remote areas. Their role will be to provide governance and oversight of the project activities, to advise on strategic direction, cultural security, interpretation, and dissemination of research findings. Whereas the advisory group will be comprised of researchers, health professionals, Aboriginal community members, and other stakeholders. Their role will be to provide governance on the methodological aspects of the study. Similarly, we've started on phase 3. This aims to conduct a systematic review which will identify and synthesize key recommendations from high-quality contemporary clinical practice guidelines for the management of osteoarthritis, rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, and gout. Phase 4 will then be to culturally adapt key recommendations that were identified from the systematic review. This will occur through consultation with the advisory group using a modified nominal group technique. Following this, phase 5 will be to develop culturally adapted arthritis resources for Aboriginal people through incorporating feedback from the community reference group and adapting draft resources based on their responses. Lastly, in phase 6, we will qualitatively evaluate the culturally adapted arthritis resources using research yarning and adapted think aloud exercises with Aboriginal community members who experience osteoarthritis, rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, and/or gout. Final resources may take the form of print, video, or web-based materials and will be guided by the preferences of the community reference group. The output will be culturally appropriate health information resources for Aboriginal people with arthritis that can be used in healthcare, self-management, or as standalone consumer information resources. We hope that through using these resources, Aboriginal people with arthritis will receive better quality care and burden will be reduced. Thank you so much, and I look forward to answering any questions you may have in the panel discussion.